What's up? This is Technically Correct with Tyler Bischoff. On today's show, Klint Kubiak is boring. Is that a good thing for the Raiders? Plus, no one knows where Tom Brady actually is. And a lot of bad quarterbacks are going to be available this offseason in the NFL. I told you yesterday that every coach has a fun introductory press conference and everybody gets excited afterwards. I was wrong. Klint Kubiak isn't that. Here we go. Klint Kubiak got introduced as the Raiders head coach yesterday, had a press conference last over 30 minutes, and he was boring. I mean, there was very little excitement from Klint Kubiak. He didn't really say anything that was excitable. He didn't even really change the tone of his voice, right? Like he was just up there answering questions like this was completely normal. And I'm not saying that means anything. Hell, I actually, if anything, think it might mean he might be a better coach because he's boring or at least not excitable with the media in a public-facing type of role. But it wasn't an exciting press conference, right? Most of them are. Most of the time, the head coach comes in and tries to say something to get people excited, right? Klint Kubiak didn't do that. There was very little pomp. There was very little anything from Klint Kubiak, which might be fine. And here's what kind of stuck out to me. John Spytek, to start the press conference, he gave a quote basically trying to be like, we didn't hire Klint Kubiak because he's a great offensive mind. He said, it was less about scheme and more about the person, the humility, the work ethic. And initially, like, I scoffed at that, right? The general manager of a team saying he hired a head coach in the NFL because of his humility and because of the person he is and not because of the scheme, not because of how good his offense was in Seattle this year. Like, that's ridiculous. It's the NFL. But then as this press conference went on, I was like, oh, wow. Like, the humility's there. We saw that yesterday. And it's boring, right? Like, it was a boring press conference from the head coach. And it got me thinking, did they hire Klint Kubiak in part because he's boring? Were they looking for a boring coaching candidate? Was that part of the goal when they were searching for coaches after firing Pete Carroll? Because they just had a season of Pete Carroll trying to prove that a 70-year-old head coach is still young and still exciting and all of that, always talking about winning. Did the Raiders just want a head coach that wouldn't be loud, that wouldn't create any news based on what he said to the media, right? And like you look at the Raiders coaches, at least since they've been in Vegas, they're almost all these excitable personalities. Josh McDaniels, not so much, but John Gruden, absolutely. Antonio Pierce, that was the entire shtick. That was all he could do. And then Pete Carroll. So like most of the coaches they've hired in Vegas have been these excitable personalities. And Klint Kubiak is the exact opposite of that. And I kind of think that might have been the point. That might have been what they were going for. Yes, they needed somebody that was an offensive play caller and had something to point to as success. But I think the boringness of Klint Kubiak might be what the Raiders were going for, given who they've had in the past. Because you hear a lot of times, more so at the college level, but across sports, when you fire a coach and hire a new one, it's like, oh, they ended up hiring just the opposite guy, right? They just wanted the opposite of what they had because what they had wasn't working. So instead of going with the experienced, long-time coach, they went with the young up-and-comer who's never had this job before, right? Instead of going with the loud, boisterous head coach, they went with the quiet, shy might not be the right word, but the quiet head coach, right? We hear that all the time. You have the offensive guy, then you get the defensive guy. You had the defense, now you get you kind of do it the opposite of what you had before. And maybe that played into why Klint Kubiak ended up getting this job. Now, couple of things from this that I enjoyed. I thought it was quite funny that Klint Kubiak was saying that they were going to have to watch a lot of tape before they decide who to take with the number one pick in the NFL draft. There was some coach speak there, probably a lie, because it's funny to hear, right? Obviously, I mean, he could say it, but obviously you're probably not going to come out and just be like, hey, we're drafting Fernando Mendoza. But it is funny to hear given that they're drafting Fernando Mendoza. Because could you imagine how funny it would be if they picked literally anybody else? Right? If they trade down, okay, we'll argue about what the compensation was. But if they pick literally anyone else, they're going to have to come out and be like, we watched the tape and we really love Ty Simpson. we're all in on Trinidad Chambliss as the quarterback. Or what might even be worse is like, we watched the tape and this Mendoza guy's a bum, so we took Ruben Bain. We just went for a different position, right? Like, it'd be funny because people would lose their minds if they did that. So I did enjoy that bit of coach speak. But Kubiak did say something that I thought was really, really interesting. And he mentioned the idea of earning the fans' trust back. Because this is a team that has not been good for a while, right? A really long time. This has not been a good organization. They don't have playoff wins. They have very few playoff appearances in over 2 decades. But the fascinating part of that is Kubiak saying, hey, we got to earn the trust back. Raiders fans are always here. Like, I know during the season when the team's really bad, like attendance in Allegiant's not always the best, but this fan base is always here. This fan base is always online loud. This fan base is around no matter how bad the team is. And honestly, it might hurt the Raiders a little bit because I think Mark Davis would realize and understand how bad they've been a lot quicker if the fan base wasn't just always here, right? If there was an actual like loss in money because the fans stopped caring because of how bad they were, it might have actually helped the Raiders recently. But the fan base is always here. And I'd argue right now, Kubiak has the trust of the fan base, right? Like they're excited about this. So I thought that was interesting because it should be the truth. It should, what the success level of this organization has been, there should be, hey, we got to get the fans back. But do they? Because I think they're here. And I think if the Raiders start off like just 2-1 next year, it's going to be hell yeah, Klint Kubiak. So we'll see what the fan base trust is, but I did find that interesting. Now, the other part that I thought was quite fascinating was the lack of Tom Brady. He did get a mention during the press conference, but he was not there. Why? What's he doing that he couldn't show up for the new head coach press conference? Remember the Raiders put out a press release when they fired Pete Carroll and they said, hey, the new search is going to be controlled or John Spytek and Tom Brady are going to be in charge of the search. So Tom Brady, in charge of the search, in charge of hiring Klint Kubiak, can't be bothered to show up. Like what's going on there? Can't show up? Too difficult to get here? And what's even worse is that yesterday, Mark Davis said Klint Kubiak will report to John Spytek and Tom Brady. Again, continuing the unknown of who is actually in charge by not saying, hey, one of those guys is ahead of the other. No, they're in a dual role, and Kubiak's got to answer to both of them, but not just one. And then who's actually in charge of the other one? We don't know. But he says, hey, he's going to report to Kubiak's going to report to Brady and Spytek. And then Davis also said, I'm going to read this tweet from Ryan McFadden, who covers the Raiders for ESPN. McFadden tweeted, ask Mark Davis if he expects Brady to be more involved and have a bigger presence inside the facility. Davis said, I think we'll wait and find out. So Mark Davis owns the Raiders. He's in charge. He says that Tom Brady is who Kubiak reports to. He says that Tom Brady was in charge of this coaching search. And yet Mark Davis has literally no idea if Tom Brady's going to show up more to the facility. How is Kubiak going to report to Tom Brady if Tom Brady's not around? Like, what do you mean he's going to report to a guy that doesn't show up? How does no one realize how moronic all of this sounds? The guy's in charge, but he's never around. You don't get to talk to him. Even Klint Kubiak gave us an idea that he knows Tom Brady's never around because he said Tom Brady gave him his phone number, so he will be calling Brady all of the time. You would think your boss, who you have to report to and who hired you, would be in the building. You could just walk down to his office and talk to him, right? He can do that with John Spytek, but not with Tom Brady. It's just wildly insane to me how it's just, oh, Tom Brady's in charge, but he's not here. Hey, Mark, you're the owner of this team. You going to see Tom Brady around some more this year? And Mark Davis says, I have no idea. Doesn't have a clue because Brady doesn't even show up for the introductory press conference. This is a celebration type moment, and Brady's not even there for that. So I'm never going to understand this, how it's just, yeah, Brady's in charge, but we also don't make him show up ever. So cool. Good job. It's not going to work. It's not there. They might get lucky with Fernando Mendoza the number 1 pick, right? Like if you get the generational quarterback, it can hide a lot of problems. We see that across the league. What are the Bills doing? They have a generational quarterback. Everything else there seems to suck. And yet they're still a legitimate contender year after year. That could be the Raiders. But just the situation with Tom Brady, it's not a good idea as an organization. Now, I do have some complaints about the actual press conference itself. First off, the Raiders brought 6 former players to the stage to sit at tables around Klint Kubiak during this press conference. If you didn't see it, the Raiders had a table in the middle where it was John Spytek, the general manager, and Klint Kubiak, the new head coach. They sat there with microphones, and then there were 2 tables on either side where 3 former Raiders players sat at each of those tables. So 6 former players just surrounding the head coach and the general manager. The obsession with, hey, the Raiders were good 30 years ago, hey, the Raiders were good 50 years ago, is wild. And to me, it took away so much from Klint Kubiak's moment. Klint Kubiak's that you're introducing the guy that you think is going to fix the franchise. And you surround him with guys from 30 years ago. Honestly, I think it's pathetic. Like, they weren't there to take questions. They didn't have anything to do with Kubiak getting hired. It was just the Raiders trying to say, remember, we used to be good, and we love our former players, which is like the extent of success this organization has had for the last 2 decades. And here's the thing, though. That sort of distraction, it worked. Because multiple questions in that press conference to Kubiak were about the history of the Raiders, which is so irrelevant. Like Marcus Allen, he has nothing to do with Klint Kubiak's future. What Marcus Allen did, what the Raiders did in the 90s and the 80s and the 70s, it has nothing to do with how good Klint Kubiak is going to be as a head coach. None of his success is based on what the Raiders did 30, 40, 50 years ago, but that's what the Raiders want you to focus on. They're obsessed with it. The other problem I have with this press conference, it was about 35 minutes. It was a long press conference. But 4 different Raiders employees asked questions. 4 different employees of the team asked questions. Now, the Raiders have 2 different team reporters that basically function as like normal journalists, except they work for the team, so they can't actually do what journalism is supposed to be. They both asked questions, and then they had a former player who is included with the radio broadcast. He asked a question, and then Harry Ruiz, who is the play-by-play radio voice in Spanish for the Raiders. Love Harry. Harry's great. Hi, Harry. But all 4 of them asked questions. And this is one of the more concerning parts about sports media, is the infiltration into the media by people that are employed by the team. People that cannot give you real news or unbiased news. Everything that they say is going to come through a team-approved layer, right? Only what the team wants you to know. The Golden Knights do it as well. UNLV kind of does it. There's some gray area there, but it's happening across sports, and it's happening a lot here. And it's good for a fan if you only want like homer opinions. If you only want, hey, everything's great, everything's going to be fine. If that's what you want as coverage of your favorite team, then this is no problem, because that's what you're going to get from these types of media members. Because again, they work for the team. They can't say anything bad, or else they don't keep that job anymore. And that's fine. If you and some fans, that is what you want, because this is fun, this is enjoyment. Like you want to be told everything's great, and that's fine. You can want that, and this is perfectly fine. But if you want coverage of teams that might be critical, right? Like when a team is bad and like, oh, are they going to fire the head coach? People that are employed by the Raiders, they can't talk about that. When Pete Carroll's still the coach, they can't talk about that. You're talking about a coworker being fired. You can't do that publicly, right? Take the Golden Knights, for example, when they sign Carter Hart. Team employees can't question that, right? They signed a guy who was acquitted of sexual assault and wasn't found guilty of anything, but did not do something that you would want to be a coworker with. If the Carter Hart story, if your company hired that guy, you'd be like, why are we hiring this guy? But you can't say that publicly, and neither can they because they are team employees. So I don't like it as somebody who's been in media my entire life that there are so many of these positions, and then at an introductory press conference, you have 4 different people get to ask questions of Klint Kubiak that are just now co-workers of Klint Kubiak. And I have one last problem on the press conference here. John Spytek was sitting on the stage at the table with the microphone. No one asked John Spytek about Max Crosby. How the hell did that happen? The biggest story in the entire NFL last week was Max Crosby possibly being traded by the Raiders. Was Max Crosby possibly saying he's done with the Raiders? That was the biggest story last week in the NFL. And the general manager of Max Crosby's team had a press conference, had a microphone in front of his face, and no one asked the general manager about Max Crosby. What's going on there? Like, that is such a failure from the media to not ask about Max Crosby. Klint Kubiak did get asked about Max Crosby, so there was, shout out to Case Kiefer. By the way, it took over 30 minutes for a question about Crosby to Kubiak. There was almost none. Case Kiefer asked one about Crosby. So we got one to Kubiak, but he's the head coach. He just got here. He's not the one to ask that question. It's Spytek, who was sitting right there with a microphone in front of his face. And nobody thought to ask him, hey, did Max Crosby say he was done with the Raiders? Are you interested in trading Max Crosby away? I mean, even just a bad question where you just say, what's happening with Crosby? Right? Like something to the GM, but no, I don't understand how that happened. It's such a failure from the media. And again, the press conference was 30 minutes long, but this is part of the reason my issue with team employees getting to ask questions is they're never going to ask that question. You're not going to, if you're an employee of the Raiders, you're not going to ask the GM, hey, did Crosby say he was done with you? You can't ask that question, but the other media members can, and they didn't. So I don't know. It's just, there were parts of that press conference that I was just like, what? How did this happen? Like, why are there 6 Raiders up there? Why is nobody asking the general manager about John Spytek? And why are 4 Raiders employees getting to ask questions at this press conference? It's just insane to me.
Battle Blast, been serving Las Vegas since June 2012 with the very best in family entertainment. We are proud to provide the best facility, equipment, and service possible. Strap on laser tag vests, step into the 5,600 square foot 2-story arena designed to look like a worn-torn city street. An exciting atmosphere filled with exhilarating music, blacklight effects, and fog. Battle Blast also features a viewing deck for those not playing can watch players vest up and catch a view of the action going on in the arena. In between games, check out our arcade and prize center and enjoy tasty treats from our snack bar. Birthday parties, sports teams, group outings, and corporate events. Battle Blast does it all. We want to make your Battle Blast experience so good you'll want to return again and again. Battle Blast is the ultimate destination for family fun and friendly competition.
Technically Correct is brought to you by Battle Blast Las Vegas, the best laser tag in Vegas. Battle Blast is the perfect spot for your next event. Kid's birthday party, corporate event. You got a Little League season that ends and you need an end of season party. Battle Blast Las Vegas is the place to go, or just do it for your own birthday. Get your friends, get your family, get your kids, get their friends together. Go see who is best at laser tag. Plus, Battle Blast has arcades and prizes, giving you more than just laser tag. Battle Blast Las Vegas, located at 8125 West Sahara Avenue, your next stop for fun in Vegas. Fernando Mendoza is not going to throw at the Combine. He is, according to Field Yates, going to throw at Indiana's Pro Day. So there's going to be a whole bunch of NFL scouts and maybe front office people that go to Bloomington, Indiana to watch Fernando Mendoza throw at a Pro Day. Do we know why? Is it because Klint Kubiak said they don't know who they're drafting, so other teams think he might fall? But this is one of the dumber things, right? The NFL has this entire event for draft prospects to go and do drills, for NFL teams to get data on, and then players just don't do them, right? And I'm not saying like they should force the players to do it, but it's just one of the dumber things that happens every single year where it's like, oh, all the names you know going to the Combine, none of them are going to do any of the drills at the Combine. The Combine's probably good for people getting drafted outside the first round. Like, I get that, but it just seems dumb that we do this every year where it's like, yeah, Literally none of the quarterbacks you want your team to draft are going to throw at the combine. I guess this year there's only one quarterback anybody wants to draft, so everybody else is going to throw. North Dakota State will not get any TV revenue money from the Mountain West for 6 years. They are going to get some subscription money. So the way the Mountain West set it up, if games are not picked up by a television provider, then they will be streamed online, and that online streaming will be behind a paywall now. But for every team, however many subscriptions you get for your team, some of that money will go back to that specific team. So North Dakota State will get some money based on that detail, but they won't get any of the actual big dollar amounts coming in from CBS Sports, Fox, the CW, any of the actual television providers. Meaning that the Mountain West is getting North Dakota State, who, again, is probably going to be one of the better teams in the conference right away, $12 million entry fee from North Dakota State, and they don't have to pay them any of the TV revenue for 6 years. What is there a single downside to North Dakota State joining the conference? Again, people have to get on a plane and go to North Dakota every other year. Your football team has to travel there. But that's it? Like, this is an incredible deal for the Mountain West. Unbelievable. Also, North Dakota State is reportedly going to appeal the NCAA so that they can be eligible for the postseason immediately. So if you listened to yesterday's show, thank you. But North Dakota State, as a new member of the FBS, has to sit out 2 years of postseason play. So they play all the regular season, but then they're not eligible to go to the college football playoff or a bowl game or the Mountain West championship game. Well, they are going to appeal that and try to get eligible right away. There's a story at CBS Sports about this where they basically were just like, hey, North Dakota State's argument is that that's an outdated rule. It doesn't need to be in place anymore, and it shouldn't apply to us. It's a stupid rule no matter what year it is, but I hope they win, just because it would be very dumb if North Dakota State, I mean, imagine they go 8-0 in the Mountain West, and then they're not in the Mountain West title game or potentially in the playoff because of that. It would be incredibly stupid. In the Olympics, the U.S. women's hockey team beat Canada 5-0. Not a medal round game yet, but that was a beatdown. Like, 5-0 is indicative of how uncompetitive Canada was against the United States. Like, that's insane. And so the U.S. has now beaten Finland, Switzerland, Canada, and Czechia by a combined score of 20-1. They scored 5 goals in every game. Czechia is the only team that scored against the U.S. Are we that much better than Canada at hockey now? Like, I know the gap after U.S. and Canada is supposed to be big, but is the gap from us to Canada just as big as it is for these other countries? The current scores say they are. I was surprised at how non-competitive that game was. I mean, Canada they had like 4 shots in the first period of that game, and it was 2-0. So that was shocking how much better. I know Canada's captain didn't play, but one player's not making that big of a difference in that game. Our soon-to-be Las Vegas A's signed Aaron Savali to a 1-year deal worth $6 million, incentives up to $1.5 million, according to Jeff Passan. Savali, starting pitcher, who was on 3 different teams last year and had a combined 4.85 ERA. Interestingly, he was excellent at the start of his career in Cleveland, but he's not been nearly as good since then, and he's played on quite a few different teams now. I'm assuming he's going to be sort of a back-end option of the rotation for the A's. I do wonder how good he'll be in Sacramento, right? It's a fair question for any pitcher, but he didn't have a great year last year, ended up on 3 different teams. His ERA was almost 5. Last year, Sacramento was the second most friendly hitters park. Only Colorado and the altitude there was a more hitters-friendly park than Sacramento. So in theory, Savali's going to be worse than he was last season, so maybe he won't be a back end of the rotation option for the A's. The Falcons are going to cut Kirk Cousins. So new league year starts in March. There is $68 million in guaranteed money to Cousins if he's on the team in mid-March. So cutting him saves the Falcons basically $68 million that they would otherwise have to pay Cousins. They're fascinating because Michael Penix tore his ACL. Might not be back for the start of the season. So what does Atlanta do at quarterback? Do they just suck it up with some crappy backup and say, all right, whenever Penix is back, and next year is a lost season if he's out for a month or more? Or do they actually go out and try to find somebody that could start right away and maybe even beat out Penix for that job? Because Penix, frankly, hasn't been that good. So what does Atlanta do? Interesting. Also, does anybody want Kirk Cousins? Right? Like, it seems like he could retire. I think that was in the initial reporting from ESPN that it's possible he just retires. But, like, what team wants Kirk Cousins? Like, I don't know what your objective would be if you're signing Kirk Cousins and planning for him to start. Although it does feel like that's a Steelers type move. But it just seems like, I don't know, my team, I don't think that I'd want Kirk Cousins. Also, the Dolphins are expected to move on from Tua. That's according to Tom Pelissero. Miami is either going to cut or trade Tua. Now, to give you the money background here, to tell you how significant this is, if the Dolphins cut Tua, then he will have a dead cap hit of $99 million. Meaning if they cut him, he's not on the team, but he still counts $99 million against the cap. They can spread that over 2 years, where it's effectively $67 million and then $32 million over the next 2 seasons, as opposed to 99 in one. But are they really going to eat that much in dead cap? Like, that seems insane. Even if you split it up, that seems wild to have 99 million over 2 years in dead cap numbers. If they trade him, the dead cap hit is 45 million over 1 season. You can't spread that one out. But that's less than the 67 million for this upcoming season, and it's obviously less than 99 million. So they're incentivized to trade him. Like, they're going to save significant cap space, probably over 2 years, if they trade him. And I still believe the Raiders should go and trade for Tua. I absolutely think that. Take on the cap hit and take a draft pick that Miami is sending you. The Raiders need draft picks. They need young assets for their rebuild. The Raiders also have plenty of cap space. And, important here, the Raiders are not trying to win now. Probably not next season either, which would be the 2 years that Tua would be on the roster, and then you could get rid of him for nothing. That is a idea the Raiders should be exploring. Do you actually want to bring on Tua and that huge dead cap hit? Maybe not. And it depends on the pick they're sitting back. Right? Like, if Miami called you today and said there's a first-round pick, yes, heartbeat, yes. But, like, it's not going to be a first. It's not going to be a second either. But, like, if they offered a third-round pick to take on Tua, I think I'm doing it, right? If it's a 6th or a 7th, probably not. But if it's a third-round pick, if I draft well, I can get a legitimate player in the 3rd round, right? That's not crazy to think you're going to get a good player in round 3. So that's a type of move the Raiders should be interested in. And here's the key. You don't ever have to play Tua, right? You draft Fernando Mendoza. He's your starter. Tua can be your backup. But that's just like, that's the type of move the Raiders should be trying to do, because they're in a spot where they're not saying we're going to try to win all of our games this season. They're in a spot where it's about building up Kubiak and Mendoza and seeing how good they are together and building the rest of the roster so that in 2028, they are really good. And so if you can get a draft pick and get a 3rd round pick and maybe a hit on that, and now you've got another player, another asset for 2028, and you just had to take on the cap hit of Tua, they should be considering making moves like that. It would be a very, very helpful move. But we'll see what happens with Tua. I can't imagine somebody's going to trade for him to make him their starter. So what does a trade actually look like? I think the Dolphins would have to give up picks to move him. So I don't know what happens there. It feels like if they're committed to not having him, they're going to have to cut him. And that just seems insane with the dead cap hit number. Technically Correct and Bischoff's Briefs is brought to you by Battle Blast Las Vegas, the best laser tag in Las Vegas. Host your next birthday party at Battle Blast. Book the party package and you'll get a private party room, a dedicated host, pizza, soda, arcade tokens, and laser tag. Plus, you can add on a game for adults. Kids are playing, you're like, that looks like fun. I want to go play. You can have a game just for adults after the kids are done, or you can just book it for your own birthday. It's Battle Blast Las Vegas, located at 8125 West Sahara Avenue, your next stop for fun in Vegas. If you want to support the show, I have a Patreon. Check me out at patreon.com/technicallycorrect with Tyler Bischoff. If you are watching the show, you'll notice I'm not in my office. I am still at the Thomas and Mack. I'm going to try to record this from the Thomas and Mack. Seems like a bad idea, but I'm going to try it anyway because there's a lot of people tearing stuff down here. If you're listening, hopefully you can't tell. Hopefully the audio editing is good enough that you have no idea that I'm not recording this in my office. But UNLV won. They beat San Jose State. They didn't blow this game late, which means I get to take a victory lap. I told you yesterday, if UNLV had a lead the final 2.5 minutes, they wouldn't lose it. And they didn't. Couple of keys. Nobody fouled out of the game for UNLV. So Josh Pastner got to play whatever lineup he wanted. He wasn't left to just play the last 5 guys on the bench. Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn, Kamani Hamilton, Tyron Jones, their 3 best players were all on the floor for the final couple of minutes as they held on to their lead. Also important, San Jose State missed some shots. They missed 3 of their last 4 shots in the final 2.5 minutes. They airballed 2 of them, right? Fresno State, Grand Canyon combined to miss 1 total shot in the final 2.5 minutes. So the opponent was not perfect like the previous 2 opponents were. San Jose State was kind of the opposite of perfect. And maybe more importantly, UNLV didn't have a single turnover in the final 2.5 minutes. If you remember, they were turning it over on 35% of their possessions in those previous 2 games. When they were blowing those leads, there were a ton of turnovers. They did not have those turnovers. Instead, we got Walter Brown hitting a fadeaway jump shot to basically seal the game. So UNLV played better down the stretch. A lot of that's opponent related, but it's also because they got to play their better players. They were playing a worse opponent and they got to have a better lineup on the floor because nobody fouled out of this game, which is the key. UNLV, it took UNLV, they went to 2 media timeouts. We were 8 minutes into the game and they had not committed a foul. It was genuinely impressive. This team was not going to have anybody foul out of the game because I went back and looked. It was 6 straight games where a UNLV player had fouled out. And in those 6, there were 12 different guys not different guys, but 12 different instances where a player did foul out of the game. Like the fouling out has been insane recently, and it didn't happen tonight. And that's a big reason why they were able to close it out because they just got to play their best players. Now, one of the more interesting parts of this game where I think we talk a lot about like, oh, coaching's not very good, but then what about the coaching is not good or is good? And I think one thing we saw from Pastner, one adjustment that helped UNLV was he basically played the entire second half without a center. They played the first roughly 3 minutes with Emmanuel Stephan in, subbed him out. Stephan never came back in, and Jacob Benarbi never came into the game in the second half. So they did not play with a center for essentially the entire second half. After the game, Josh Pastner said that was because of San Jose State's 3-point shooting, and he wanted to get smaller so they could defend that. Before taking Stephan out early in the second half, San Jose State made 8 of 16 threes. After that, they made just 3 of 8 from 3. Now, 3 of 8 is still like a good percentage, but the volume got much, much smaller in the final 17 minutes of the game. And UNLV was able to switch most screens. They weren't switching everything, but they were able to switch most things. And just generally speaking, switching helps to take away open 3-pointers, right? It's one of the more simple ways to do it. There's some other problems, right? You then have your big guys guarding guards or your guards guarding their centers, whatever it is. But when you don't play a center, all of your guys are smaller guarding out on the perimeter. So it helped a lot the way UNLV was able to defend San Jose State. Now, having to make an adjustment to defend San Jose State's its own problem because San Jose State's a terrible offensive team. So that's not a team you would like to sit back and say, oh, we got to make this big adjustment to defend them. But UNLV did, and it worked for UNLV. They still didn't have a great second half defensively, but it was good enough to win. It was better than what the first half was. And I think one of the keys here, I don't think UNLV can do that if Tyron Jones isn't playing in this game. Tyron Jones made his return first time he had played in, 4 games? And I don't think they can get away with no center if Tyron Jones is not on the floor because Tyron Jones, I mean, he's better than their centers at contesting shots at the rim. He defensively makes such a big difference on what UNLV allows at the rim because guys get their shots blocked or just get their shots altered. There was a play in the first half of this game where I can't remember who it was for San Jose State, but I mean, he got a step on Tyron Jones. It was a bad closeout by Tyron Jones. He's giving up a drive into the lane, But Tyron Jones is still athletic enough, quick enough, and can jump with long arms that he affects the shot, forces a missed layup. He didn't block it, but he forced a wild layup despite getting beat on the play. And that's what he's able to do better than anybody else on this roster. It makes such a big difference. So I don't know if Pastner can really use that adjustment effectively if there's no Tyron Jones. And he loves to talk about injuries, and he won't outright say it's an excuse, but he brings them up enough that it sounds like an excuse. This is part of why the injuries matter. It limits what you're able to do, the things you're able to change as a coach when you don't have somebody. And Tyron Jones is, I mean, Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn's the most important player. Tyron Jones is second most important on this team. And they did a fine job. The other thing was they did a fine job rebounding without a center on the floor, because that's probably the big concern there. San Jose State's a bad rebounding team anyway, so it shouldn't have been a problem. And they just did an okay job, but it was good enough, again, to actually work. Now, Tyron Jones comes back, and he's great on the defensive end. That's where he makes a huge impact. But on the offensive end, he had 13 points, and it was 6 of 8 shooting. And what I thought was, like, funny, like almost like San Jose State forgot, is they're playing a zone, and Tyron Jones just hangs out on the baseline in the dunker spot. And I think it was 3 times in this game, they leave Tyron Jones to help, and he just gets a dump off pass for a free dunk. It's like he's the most perfect player for the dunker spot. And San Jose State was like, yeah, that really tall guy that jumps high and dunks, yeah, we're just going to leave him alone over there. So he was effective in beating that San Jose State zone and made them play man for pretty much the last, I want to say, 10 minutes of this game. Howie Fleming also came back in this game, but he only played 4 minutes. And Josh Pastner, after the game, kind of described it away as like feel, that he makes substitutions and lineup decisions based on feel in each game, and that he just felt like Howie Fleming wasn't going to help them win the game in the second half. And Howie Fleming wasn't great defensively in his few minutes, but it was a few minutes. You can have a pretty easy bad 2 or 3 defensive possessions and get subbed out, and you're like, oh, that guy's terrible. So if he had played more, he probably would have looked better. But I'm curious sort of what they do with Howie Fleming going forward, how healthy he is, because he is one of the better players on this team. He's been in the starting lineup more often than not. So how often does he play coming back from injury? Also, one of the funnier parts of this game is that Kamani Hamilton, his parents were here to watch him play. And we didn't find this out until after the game when Josh Pastner talked to the media. But Pastner said his parents came all the way from Mississippi to watch him play. And Josh Pastner said he pleaded with Kamani Hamilton to not foul out so that his parents could actually watch him play. Hamilton had 3 fouls in 36 minutes, about as good as he's done in a game this year. And he was awesome. He had 23 points. He was only 6 of 9 from the floor because he drew a bunch of fouls, drew 5 fouls in this game, went to the free throw line 9 times and made 8 of them. Big number there. So it was 23 points, 10 rebounds, and 4 assists in 36 minutes. It's one of the best games he's played all season long for UNLV. And maybe it's because his parents were actually here. But he, again, at San Jose State, who's bad, but Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn was awesome again. He's now the leading scorer in the Mountain West. Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn was awesome again. If Kamani Hamilton scores like that, they've got a legitimately good, like 1-2 offensive punch, because Kamani Hamilton was creating his own shots, right? He was attacking mismatches, attacking closeouts, and getting to the paint and drawing a bunch of fouls. Like he was really, really good. And like they, in theory, have 2 guys that can do that. Their offense should be fine. Like their shooting's not there. I mean, it's been fine, but the shooting's not great overall. At least the depth of guys they have to shoot, but like they can score. Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn's been really good, really consistent too. And Kamani Hamilton, if he can do that, they should be really good offensively. It's the other end of the floor that they're not very good. Now, last thing on this, and by the way, if you're watching, I am sitting in the media section as people are coming to pick up trash, but the crowd was bad for this game. Last home game, Grand Canyon was here. They had a student section. It was on a Saturday. It wasn't 8 o'clock on a Tuesday. That probably helps too. But the atmosphere was really good for the Grand Canyon game. And then this was one of the worst ones of the season, right? It was 8 o'clock Tuesday night against a terrible team that nobody's interested in watching. And, he's also not very good. It's understandable. I'm not sitting here saying like, oh, UNLV fans need to show up, but it's a bad environment, right? We just saw what a good environment, a decent environment was when Grand Canyon was here. And now we see a bad one. And this is when it's kind of like, oh, this kind of sucks, right? Like, I like talking about, oh, Pastner went to a no center lineup. I like talking about, oh, Kamani Hamilton and Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn can make this offense really good. I like talking about what Tyron Jones can do defensively. They ran a play. I might break it down if I get around to it. They ran a play like 4 or 5 times in the second half that they scored off of, like all but once. I like talking about that stuff, but none of it matters because the team's not very good, and there's not a fan base that cares about it right now because the team's not good. If the team was good, there'd be a lot of people that care about that stuff. But it just that's part of what sucks. And then you experience this game, and it's college basketball. It's supposed to be fun, and it's kind of dead. It's kind of like, okay. And last update on this. Shout out to Arnold, who listens to the show, who forwarded this to me. But UNLV is not going to tarp off the upper deck. I assume if you took the fan survey, you know this already, but they are not going to tarp off the upper deck. They're going to leave it open. They cited ADA accessibility as a big reason why they need to keep it open, but also said that in the fan surveys, fans did not want to tarp off the upper deck. So they're leaving it open. If you got seats up there, congratulations, you'll get to keep using those seats. But they are going to go ahead with other changes. Now, I read the email. It didn't really say when. I assume next season, but I guess it's possible now that this home game's over and they have a couple of road games that they could do it for the rest of this year. But they are planning to move the band. The band is behind one basket. Oh, this is going to be terrible if you're watching. It's even worse if you're on the podcast, but I'm going to take the camera and try to show you. The band is usually behind that basket. They're going to move them down to this basket. Oh, it's going to be great. That basket's where the student section is. They're also going to move the benches. They're just going to switch which teams at which bench. UNLV is going to go to the opposite bench so that the visiting bench is by the student section. Now, I said this last time. It doesn't matter. There is no student section. There actually were 10 people cheering. They had a coordinated chant at one point. It's one of the best student sections of the year. But there is no student section, right? In theory, when the team's good, there'll be a student section and maybe it'll matter. But there's not a student section. So it doesn't matter that you put the visitors bench by the student section because they don't exist, right? So they're going to make those changes. How much does that actually matter? Not at all. But the upper deck will not get a tarp. Here you go. You can get a look at the upper deck over here too. The upper deck will not get a tarp. They will leave it open. But that's it for Technically Correct. I'm Tyler Bischoff. Thanks for tuning in.